Conformity is the changing of one's behavior or beliefs in response to explicit or implicit pressure, whether it is real or imaged from others. Have you ever done something, then wondered, why did I do that? Like choose to sit on the side with more people when you enter the classroom? Or choosing the answer that most people does when there is several options? Or even putting out the umbrella when there is no rain, but simply because you see others doing it? Many of the time, these behaviors we have are the result of conformity. There was a very famous classic experiment about conformity, the Asch experiment, which is conducted in 1951. In the experiment, a naive participant was put in a room with 7 Confederates. They were shown a card with a line on it, and another card with 3 lines on it labeled as A, B, and C. They were asked to tell which of the 3 lines was the same length as the target line, and the answer was very obvious. Each individual had to call out his judgment publicly, one at a time. The 7 Confederates were required to give the wrong answer, and the experiment was to see how the naive participant would react to the others' behaviors. Overall, participants conformed to the group and gave the wrong answer on a third of critical trials.
To evaluate conformity, we performed an experiment. At a bus stop, we placed either a hula hoop or a foam board in an area where people lined to get onto a bus. We then observed what people's reactions would be to these objects. We hypothesized that this decision would be influenced by the person or persons in front of them. So, we expected one of 3 things to occur. We could see a sequence of people avoiding the object, stepping on the object, or a random assortment of the 2 behaviors. In the second phase of our experiment, we had Confederates join the lineup to see what would happen if they did something different from those in front of them. Would the people following our Confederates do what they did, thus conforming to their behavior?
We used 2 materials to do our experiment, a hula hoop and a foam board. For the hula hoop, people are generally more inclined to step into it. Because the hula hoop is big, and due to the perception of it, people are more likely to step into it. However, if we use Confederate to step over or avoid the hula hoop, people behind them tend to follow, and that is the great example of conformity. For the foam board, the results are opposite to the results of the hula hoop. You can see that people are more likely to avoid it instead of stepping on it. Because the foam board is thought to be an obstacle, and people tend to avoid it. If we try another trial using Confederate to start stepping on it, you can see that the people behind them also step on the board. This is also an example of conformity.
This experiment is an example of autokinetic mimicry, which is about whether or not people will imitate the actions of others mindlessly. The basic rationale behind is that the more people do something, the more likely it is that other people will follow. So, if only one person does certain action, there will be less motivation for others to follow such action. Let's back to the case of our experiment. When we use 1, 2, or even 3 Confederates to intentionally step on or avoid the hula hoop or the foam board, we often find that those walking behind the last Confederate wouldn't follow the behavior of the Confederate. However, if we use up to 4 or even 5 Confederates to intentionally step on or avoid the hula hoop or the foam board, we could successfully get the people walking behind the last Confederate to follow the action. Then we have a case of majority influence. Why is that? The main reason is that, according to the principle of ideomotor action by William James, the mere thinking about a behavior makes its actualization more likely. It is because the brain regions responsible for perception overlap with those responsible for action. Apply it to our case. It means that when the people after the last Confederates sees others behave in a particular way, the idea of that behavior is brought to mind either consciously or not. Then he or she will be more likely to follow that action. especially given that the existence of the hula hoop or foam board placed on the path created an ambiguous situation for the pedestrians. According to Muzaffar Zarif, who researched on how groups influence the behavior of individuals by shaping how reality is perceived, an ambiguous situation could lead people to draw on others' behavior as their reference for proper action. The more people do the certain behavior, the more it seems that behavior to be an appropriate one. This is the informational social influence. However, this informational social influence could be leveled off by a saturation point, which means that up to a certain level, even further addition of people doing the same action won't further increase the effect of conformity. Moreover, if a counteraction is seen and supported by more than one people, an ally is formed and which will weaken the informational social influence. And again, the more people join this ally, the stronger the force to weaken the informational social influence. At the same time, somebody might not follow the others because they want to demonstrate their freedom by being different, who are maybe more to the idea of individualism.
Nevertheless, our experiment has some limitations. First, the location. Some preferable locations at which people walk in single direction and width of road is appropriate for setting up our device may not have a place for hiding the camera. If the roads were too wide, people would rather walk farther from the hula hoop or the foam board we set. The pressure generated by the setup is thus reduced, and this possibly affected the conformity behavior. Second, subject's attention. We could not ensure every subject aware of the action of confederates in the front. It affects our estimation on the amount of pressure for conformity to occur. In addition, there were some other limiting factors, like weather, which affects light adequacy for observation, and type of shoes that people who wore high-heeled shoes may not be able to skip a large step.